it's that time again. What time? Wednesday. For Wednesday Comics with me, Mr. Nelson. So, gotta finish off Titans Beast World. I finally got the final two. And the penultimate one reveals the mystery behind Dr. Hate. Yes. And it's already been spoiled who Dr. Hate is. So the art continued to be good, having an excellent artist in the form of Ivan Reyes, and figured, oh boy, that's it, 2 issues in, and then it's going to suck. It didn't. Follow-up art was really good. So it ends up Amanda Waller is the real villain behind everything, and she's in cahoots with this Dr. Hate character, which you would think would be more of a Dr. Fate villain. And maybe that will come to pass in some form or fashion. But at the moment in this, not so much. Of course, it's a Titan-centric story and all of that. And as events go, since it was basically a Titan story, so it's like it could have just been told within the Titan series and left at that, although it remains the blatantly odd thing of the Justice League decides to just sit a year out for some reason. The Titans got it, let the kids do it. And even though it was unexpected, they had this world threat, they dealt with it, but then that created a whole new problem for them to deal with. In a lot of ways, it was fine. It was a sound plot for it, and all of this. And as events go, this is probably as good as it gets. They've had way too many, so there's been a saturation of it, which will hurt any event, no matter how good it is. This has been too many. But certainly this year, or well, last year, I suppose, coming into this year, this is it, and it's a very basic story. You have the sad story of Beast Boy. Raven's in love with him, and she has this tragedy about it all. Dick Grayson having to step up and be the leader of this group and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, when with Batman, he turned into a monster because of the Beast World thing going on. So you can understand while he's not around. And of course, Nightwing wants to save him, and spoiler, he does. But at the same time, you've got Superman, who just sort of floats around in outer space. It's like, no. Either he gets taken down so you can explain why he's not doing more, or you got him doing something, so it's a flaw there. Then of course the idiocy that there are two Supermen. Yes, Clark Kent and John Kent. But we all know Clark Kent is Superman, John Kent is just John Kent. He could be Superboy, but they took that away from him for reasons. And then also there's just too many Superboys. It's kind of like Robin. It's too many Robins. Anyway, the big reveal, oh no, Dr. Hate is really Raven and killed her boyfriend and all that. Oh. Now some people were upset about this. I guess it had more impact for people that are really into the Titans. I never really was. I would check in here and there. And all that, but there was going to be a big reveal about it anyway, and in the context of this story, it makes sense to bring it more close to home to Raven herself, considering what happened to Beast Boy and all that. So I wasn't that bothered by it. Is it kind of an obvious thing? Yeah, but that's always the case when you have this mysterious villain and who's behind the mask and all that sort of thing. So, but as far as did it take away from the story overall, I don't think so. So the final countdown, evolution, the final evolution, and all that. So Waller has decided we're just going to kill all the beasts. And then the president's like, oh my God, that's too much. So he agrees to to work with a Nightwing and everything. And then they suddenly realize, now this is where it kind of gets stupid. Somewhat. I mean, granted, in the chaos and whatnot, they realize that superpowered people draw the spores. They would rather infect superpowered people, stronger hosts, than ordinary people. So they've decided to make themselves bait so they can trap the spores and in the threat, even though Beast Boy's Star Conqueror has been killed. There's still, the spores are still there, causing people to remain in animal form. So then here you have Superboy doing his John Kent doing his Electro John Kent thing, which again, I would have thought, see, this would give him a different look and a different agent. Maybe he could just be super Electro. I guess they can't use the word Electro because of Marvel, or something like that, to give him his own superhero identity and all that stuff. But whatever. Again, Clark Kent is Superman, John Kent is John Kent. So save Batman and all that stuff, and then they've got their plan. But Amanda Waller remains in power for future stories to use her as the main overarching villain who has noble intentions and believes that the superpowers are inevitably going to be corrupted and whatnot. And, there's some truths there and that sort of thing. But her methods would be quite questionable. After something like this, I mean, the president can't get rid of her unless, of course, she has the other laptops and stuff, which she probably would. So there you go. Anyway, boy, it's too bad about Beast Boy, huh? Well, guess what? Yes, it's like Star Trek 3. There's a way to bring him back. and that's fine. That's typical of stuff. And I don't, and it makes sense that all these spores are aspects of Garfield, Beast Boy. And so they figure it out. And they know what to do. Raven has her confrontation with her evil self and seemingly defeats her evil self. But there's a catch and a spoiler thing. Hey, look at that. Imagine what her vision looks like. Anyway, there we go. The super family shows up. But all in all, good enough and everything. And they save the deal. Amanda Waller takes over the Hall of Justice. So they're going to let that be the lagging effect of the event, which honestly, there should always be one if you're going to call it this major event, and it should invoke a new era or what have you. So that's that, provided DC survives long enough for that to be relevant. But probably, unfortunately, sets up yet another event that, and this one was only sort of adequate. So not really looking forward to another one, but gonna get it. So anyway, there you go. You get your happy ending, but then there's a terrible epilogue. And I'll save that spoiler for later, even though it's also blatantly obvious. You ever see the end of the real Twin Peaks? The original, meanwhile, over at Marvel, their best comic book series going, The Incredible Hulk, which is pursuing this horror element with monsters, which is appropriate considering the Hulk himself is a monster, and this this monster cult or whatever, the children of the mother of horrors, probably will be identified as Lilith if they haven't already, and perhaps I'm forgetting. I apologize. But here we have a dream sequence of Banner being chased as he is the actual the psyche of the Hulk, because it's just him. He and the Hulk are the same person, obviously, but it's because of trauma, a multiple personality situation. And the spirit of the monster that is possessing the Hulk is chasing him. So it doesn't look good for Hulk, does it? And the thing about it, it almost looks like the Hulk has a venom on him, but that's not what it is. It's just a manifestation of the monstrous demon that has possessed him. and it doesn't look good. But then this other, boy, that looks cool. That might be an interesting thing to check out. Another version of aliens, you know. But anyway, Ghost Rider shows up, and Ghost Rider is the grandpa or great grandpa for this kid. So this, you know, thing. And I don't know if they're wanting that to spin off into something, maybe. But it's kind of the same situation, and it ends with that, with the Ghost Rider pointing this out to Hulk, that he's responsible for the girl the way he's responsible for the boy. And it's also your weakness. The monsters can threaten the helpless child. You may be all powerful and everything, but they're not, and that's how they'll get you. And he warns him about that. So the art's great. The action scenes are good. The only potential flaw in it is that the narrative is dragging a bit. In the sense that, as good as these are, they're kind of repetitive. There's different angles to it in the addition of Ghost Rider here, or this version of Ghost Rider. It's cool and all that, and it does have a good little cap on it, but too many more of these, of yet another monster that he fights, and then another one that might help him or not, or whatever the angle might be. It's still, well, this week it's this monster and that monster, always teasing that it's leading up to this ultimate battle with the mother of horrors, who's bound and determined to recruit the Hulk into her legion of monsters to wipe out humanity and conquer the earth and all that. But yeah, there's the little personal chat between Ghost Rider and the Hulk. And but overall, easily the best comic book Marvel is doing as of now. Moon Knight is restarted. Moon Knight kind of held that title more or less by default. And we'll see how it continues after they killed off the main character and all that, supposedly. But for Marvel, the Incredible Hulk right now is the best they've got. Hopefully there is a payoff for this storyline, and they got something in the works going forward. My guess is the girl will ultimately be lured into becoming a monster herself, because in a lot of ways she wants that raw power, because of how helpless she felt of the abuse she suffered. And she looks at the Hulk and sees that power, and she wants it for herself. And I think it'll probably go to something like that, and somehow Hulk and Bruce Banner got to save her from it. And that's fine. It's predictable as it is. It's in the handling and the execution at that point. And that could be a good end, at least the arc. As for them continuing on as companions for future stories, that would be fine, as they've got this basically father-daughter thing going on now. And go after, switch over to supervillains or something, and there could still be horror aspects. There's other horror characters and elements they could utilize, vampires and stuff like that, in a Hulk title, and that would work too. But eventually, no matter how many different weird monsters you get the Hulk to fight, you end up doing the same thing, and that's the repetition. Despite the ideas and decorations and stuff, can ultimately mean death for a series, So hopefully that doesn't happen. But so far, enjoying it. But, I'm always concerned by warning signs, and I'm probably more sensitive to it in this era than ever before. Finally, the other one I read that I'll talk about here, I did read others, but that's for some other video that I may or may not make. The Secret Wars Battle World. The art is fine. It's okay for what it is. Unless you're a sucker for Secret Wars like me, there's really no reason to read this. And it's rather absurd, of this whole adventure that takes place in between two panels in issue 12 of the original Secret Wars. My guess is they might end this setting up something for the current Spider-Man, and saying, oh, this happened, but he doesn't remember it because their memories were erased. And especially the villains who never, only Absorbing Man was the only villain that was actually in the Secret Wars. like Spider-Man and Human Torch were. Hobgoblin wasn't, Falcon wasn't, Daredevil's there too, all that stuff. And then this could be some time travel shenanigans of some entity from the current era doing this and focusing entirely on Spider-Man for whatever reason, and all that. But and then there's interesting nods to things that you have to be in the know as to why it's there, and it's referencing to the Venom costume that Spider-Man's wearing, and is unaware of this at the moment. But actually, that kind of cuts into how the narrative unfolded in his own title. Reed Richards did offer, say, "Hey, I want to take a look at that when we get back home." He said, "Yeah, sure." And then he just kept blowing it off and forgot about it until finally things began to get weird. And he went and did it and found out, oh my God, it's alive and all that, So it kind of cuts into that. So, but anyway, can't recommend it in that there's not a whole lot there other than the art is sound. Tom DeFalco is a solid writer, but it's a gimmicky thing for the anniversary of Secret Wars. And that's about it. So if you're a sucker and fan of the original Secret Wars, then it's interesting, but it's nowhere near on par with that. And takes place between two panels. It's a bit much. But anyway, that's what I read for this week's episode. Meanwhile, there is this, which is this article at Bounding into Comics of Marvel and DC to reportedly reprint crossovers for the first time in decades, including Amalgam Comics and JLA Avengers. There's Super Soldier. It's funny, I just started buying up some of these that I had missed when that happened. I only had a couple of them. And then all of a sudden, because I was looking at reprints, not reprints, collections of them, and they were all sold out and stuff. And I'm like, ah, damn it. Well, looks like there'll be new collections. So, yeah, the article every so often, a good bit of comic book news trickles. So you got your chance to check out these. I've never had a copy of the Spider-Man versus Superman comic from the 70s. And so this will be my chance. So it's good news in that sense. Didn't read this one, although it's interesting. This is not Batman. This is the Azrael Batman when Batman broke his back, or well, Bane did it. And then you have Punisher teaming up, which would make an interesting team up, but they're not the actual. I mean, at least Punisher is Punisher, but although this is the more violent and brutal Batman, so I don't know. Maybe Punisher's like, hey, you might want to rein that in. I don't know. So it's actually a bit of a rumor. It says Marvel and DC are collaborating on reprinting many of the Amalgam titles, including Magneto and the Magnetic Men, and the crossover events, including Batman Punisher books. The artist whose work graces the interiors of both books revealed, to this end, they have asked for any extras they can include in the new versions. I don't have too many originals left, but if anyone on the group have any of the pages and are willing to share scans, please let me know. I guess he was on a Facebook thing or something. Oh, Bleeding Cool, as reverse relay, but Bleeding Cool. Publishing decision was initially public attention courtesy the post by seasoned comic book artist Barry Kitson. Yeah, Facebook art collector group. That's where he did it. All right, so that's what led to the revelation that there's plans afoot for this sort of thing, and for the extra stuff. So here's his thumbnails, stuff like that. And from other artists involved in this, perhaps they're seeking out their sketches and whatnot to add to the collections, so you can have this sort of concepts and sketches gallery in the back. So so they haven't really announced it yet, but it makes sense to do it. It's long overdue, and there's been animosity between the camps over the years. Perhaps that delayed any intention to do something like this. But wow, this whole list, that would be really cool if they did all of that. So there's a bunch of them there. And then we get these were the ones where they actually had a series of characters versus each other. Here's the Connor Kent Superboy versus the Ben Reilly Spider-Man. So again, two of the ones who weren't the actual original character. But nevertheless, good enough, I suppose. And then Amalgam, which was interesting. It's fun. And that's it. It's only done for fun. You know, the shield should have been red and white, don't you think? I mean, but anyway, all that stuff. And then, of course, the grandpapa of them all, JLA versus Avengers, which was cool. And actually, you know, these are done as silly and fun, and that's good, but don't really have any impact in the overall narrative of the two companies and whatnot. You know, and really you can understand why they're separate and all that. However, this one in particular, I do recall some issues of Justice League referring to these events. They couldn't actually show the Avengers and all that, but they referred to it as having happened, especially what happens to the villain Krona in it and all that sort of stuff. So there were collections of this one, but they haven't been in print for a while, I guess. And then they only brought it back for a charity fund for on the passing, sadly, of George Perez, who is the the great artist who did this. There actually was a JLA versus Avengers title that they were working on. I don't know if that was late 80s or early 90s, and then for whatever reason that got scrapped, and then they later returned to it. So, and he got to do it. And with all that stuff, he's the guy who can cram all that in, you know. So, so he says, as of writing, word remains on whether or not any of these editions will feature a reprint of Marvel Comics Quasar Volume 1, number 17. I actually had this one. Wasn't a big Quasar reader, but I heard about this, so I looked into it. And in the story, there was the ultimate who's the fastest in the Marvel 616 universe. And there was this race going on between all their speedsters. And then suddenly some mysterious multiversal traveler clad in red spandex by the name of Barry Allen, which was an unofficial tribute by Mark Grunwald, who was a DC fan working at Marvel, and artist Mike Manley, to the then relatively recent self-sacrificing death of Barry Allen in DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths. And I don't know if this had anything I doubt it, but it's like Grant Morrison, I believe, brought Barry Allen back, or maybe that was Jeff Johns eventually. But the idea was that he lived on within the Speed Force. And so after what happened to him in the Crisis, that he's been shifting through universes. And so this is an example of that. He went to the Marvel universe. And so he was still alive, you know, so he returned, even though he clearly disintegrated into nothingness in the Crisis on Infinite Earth. So that would be a nice thing to include in all of this. Don't know if that's how they'll do it, or they'll just do the reprints. But right now, overall, for both companies, reprints of their great eras, their past glories, is the way to go. Because very little that they produce now is all that great. In a lot of ways, DC does better quality-wise, but it's just not enough, and a lot of damage has been done. So something like this would give them a shot in the arm. It was suggested, I think, by some pros that to do a new crossover between the two would gen up excitement for the big two in the superhero genre, but I don't think so. Not after the damage done, and everybody, oh, how are they going to mess it up? That kind of thing. Whereas these primarily done for fun, and might want to try doing that on your titles in general. Just a thought. All right, there you go. Some comic book reviews and some perhaps positive news for something to look forward to from the big two. Once again, looking to the past.